Your teacher lied to you. Not accidentally, not because they didn't know better. They lied because the entire system required them to. Every time they told you to work hard and you'd succeed, every time they said education was the great equalizer, every time they promised that playing by the rules would pay off, they were handing you a script written by people who got rich doing the exact opposite. And the really twisted part? Most of them believed it too. You weren't educated, you were trained. And what you were trained to do is make other people wealthy. There's a test every adult takes without realizing it. It happens the first time you get a real paycheck. You see the number you expected, then you see what actually hits your account. Hundreds of dollars just gone. Taxes, deductions, contributions you were told were smart. And something in your gut whispers that this doesn't feel right. But you ignore it, because you were taught this is normal, that withholding is responsible, that saving 10% of what's left, avoiding debt, showing up on time, that's the formula. Do this for 30 years and you'll be fine. And for a very specific, very limited version of fine, that's true. But here's what they never told you. The people writing those rules don't follow them. They never did. And the gap between what you were taught and what actually works isn't an accident. It's the entire point. Let's go back to where it starts. Elementary school. You learn that money comes from work. You trade time, you get paid, you save some in a piggy bank. Simple, fair, honest. Middle school, maybe they mention interest. High school, if you're lucky, someone says 401k without explaining what it actually does. The underlying message never changes. Stay in the system, follow the path, and you'll come out okay. Then you graduate. You get the job. The test begins. And here's the thing nobody mentioned. The actual wealthy don't earn money the way you do. They don't save their way to millions. They don't climb salary ladders hoping for raises. They operate in a completely different economy with different rules, different math, and different tax codes. And the system you were taught to trust? It exists specifically to keep you from accessing that economy. Not by force, by ignorance. Here's the structure of the trap. You were taught to earn income, wages, salary, payment for your time. That's the most expensive type of money you can make. It's taxed before you see it, taxed at the highest rates, and there's almost nothing you can do to reduce it. The wealthy don't earn income. They generate capital gains. They own assets that appreciate, stocks, businesses, real estate. And when those assets pay out, the tax rate is cut in half. Sometimes they never sell at all. They borrow against what they own, pay no tax, and live off loans with interest rates lower than inflation. You were taught to save after taxes take their cut. The wealthy invest before taxation, sheltering money in retirement accounts, business structures, trusts. They write off their cars, their travel, their meals. The tax code isn't something they suffer, it's something they use. You were taught that debt is dangerous. The wealthy use leverage to buy cash-flowing assets that other people pay off. A rental property where tenants cover the mortgage. A business loan that funds expansion. Borrowing isn't risk to them, it's a tool. All of this is legal, encouraged even. The system isn't broken, it just wasn't designed for you. Let me show you the math. You make $60,000 a year. After federal and state tax, Social Security, Medicare, health insurance, you take home about $43,000. You save 10% like you're supposed to. That's $4,300 a year. Do that for 30 years with a 7% return, and you'll have around $400,000. Adjust for inflation, and it's worth maybe $250,000 in today's dollars. That's your retirement. That's the dream they sold you. Now take someone else making the same $60,000, but they buy a duplex, live in one unit, rent the other for $1,500 a month. The tenant pays the mortgage, the insurance, the property tax. 30 years later, they own an asset worth $600,000, paid for almost entirely by someone else's rent checks. And because it's structured as rental income, they get to deduct depreciation. They write off repairs. They pay lower effective taxes on the cash flow. Same starting salary, completely different ending. And none of that was in the curriculum. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. Warren Buffett pays a lower tax rate than his secretary. Not because he's cheating, because his money comes from investments, and hers comes from labor. The system rewards him for that. Billionaires borrow against their stock portfolios instead of selling. No sale means no capital gains tax. They live on debt that costs them less than inflation. They're literally being paid to spend other people's money. Meanwhile, you were told debt is the enemy. And it is, if it's credit card debt or a car loan. But asset-backed debt? That's how empires are built. The difference is whether the debt costs you money or makes you money. School never taught you that distinction. There's a reason financial literacy isn't mandatory. A population that understands assets, leverage, and tax strategy is a population that's much harder to extract value from. You were taught what you need to know to be a productive worker, not what you need to know to stop being one. And here's the part that stings. The advice you got isn't wrong. It's just catastrophically incomplete. Saving is smart. Avoiding bad debt is smart. Working hard is smart. But those things create stability, not wealth. And in an economy where housing costs have grown 3 times faster than wages since 1980, where a bachelor's degree costs what a house used to, where medical debt is the leading cause of bankruptcy, stability is expensive. The math isn't working anymore. One income used to buy a house, raise kids, and retire with a pension. Now 2 incomes barely cover rent in most cities. Wages have flatlined for 40 years while asset prices have exploded. If you're only saving, you're on a treadmill that's speeding up. You're working harder every year just to stay in place. The people getting ahead aren't running faster. They own the treadmill. They own the apartment buildings where rent increases every year. They own the index funds that compound while they sleep. They own the businesses that generate profit whether they show up or not. Ownership is the only move that scales, and you were trained to be an employee. Some people argue this was intentional, that the education system was never built to create wealth builders. It was built to create workers. In the early 1900s, factories needed obedient labor. Public schools exploded in size, modeled after Prussian systems designed to produce soldiers and bureaucrats. You learned to sit still, follow instructions, finish on time. Perfect skills for an assembly line. Terrible skills for building wealth. The structure hasn't really changed. You're still graded on compliance and memorization. There's no class on salary negotiation, no unit on equity compensation, no semester on how the tax code actually works. When financial literacy is taught, it's about budgeting and credit scores. Important? Sure. But it's like teaching someone to tread water without mentioning that boats exist. Millions of people graduate knowing how to be excellent employees and terrible owners. That's not a bug. That's the design. So here's what you do. You can't rewrite your past. And knowing the game is rigged doesn't change the scoreboard. But you can change the strategy. Stop thinking of money as something you trade hours for. Start thinking of it as something you deploy. Learn how assets work, how they're taxed, how they're leveraged, how they grow. Start small. A side business with write-offs, a brokerage account, a house hack. The goal isn't to become a billionaire. It's to stop playing a game where the only legal move is selling your time. Because if you keep doing what school taught you, you'll keep getting what school promised. A decent job, a modest retirement, a life that's fine. And if that's genuinely enough, none of this matters. But if you've ever felt like you're doing everything right and still losing ground, if the gap between you and them keeps widening no matter how hard you work, now you know why. It's not you. It's the blueprint you were handed. The system doesn't need to change for you to win. You just need to stop pretending the game you were taught is the only one being played. If this changed the way you see money, subscribe, like, comment, and share. This channel breaks down the financial system the way school never did.